was they found out that he was going down to Catonsville and making his regular confession to Father Schmidt. Now, that confession could have had nothing to do with what he was charged with. I remember that didn't even come up in the conversation. I had no idea what that priest, who he was or what he was being charged with. We were just talking about confession. But what Father Schmidt had to do was he had a prepared statement, prepared by a lawyer, a canon lawyer, a church lawyer, so that when the judge asked, because he was subpoenaed, you know, have you heard Father so-and-so's confession? When somebody says that, now if you say yes, but it had nothing to do with it, just the fact that you've said yes, I've heard his confession, implies in people's mind, if you say yes, but I can't tell you what he confessed, all right, what is the jury going to think? Right?
Guilty.
Yeah, he must have done this because he went and made a confession. So when Father Schmidt had a very fancy thing, he said, I will neither confirm nor deny that I've ever heard his confession, and I cannot speak, and I'm going to plead the fifth. You know, and so, you know, and Father Schmidt said, you got to be willing as a priest to go to jail rather than even imply that you've ever heard somebody's confession. You know, you got to be willing to do that, and I think that is true. Now, I've also heard a very bad priest who was being brought up on some very naughty charges, and he was on the witness stand at his own trial, and he tried to implicate another staff member for the person who had actually done this. And in the course of that trial, this priest said, well, I can't tell you whether I think so-and-so did this, because, you know, I've heard his confession before, and that wouldn't be right. And the bishop defrocked him that instant. There was a press conference held immediately after the trial, and the bishop said whether or not Father so-and-so did this particular crime is now irrelevant. The fact that he even implicated somebody under the seal of confession proves that he cannot be a priest, and I'm using canon such and such to immediately inhibit him, and after 6 months he'll be deposed. Right? So do know that even the most progressive, inventive theologically priest and bishop of the diocese knows the importance of the seal of the confessional, and will go to death with that. Okay, capiche? Right. If you have any other questions about confession, how to make one, what it involves, I have pamphlets. I've got pamphlets for everything, but I do have some pamphlets and some, there's a book called the St. Augustine's Prayer Book. Charles, do you have your copy of it right with you? It's a wonderful little book. It's got all sorts of prayers and litanies and meditations, and it's got a wonderful preparation for confession in there. Lists all the 7 deadly sins, breaks them down into general categories, and then gives specifics. And you start, here, this is the traditional one, but you can order these from the Shota House's bookstore or any other good Anglican bookstore. And in there is a preparation for, hey, yours doesn't have that, I'm just kidding. I promise you, here it is. Litanies for the dead, for the dying, Requiem Mass. The preparation for confession, do you remember? Here it is. So here it is, it's like, it shows a general sin, and then it gives you all sorts of real specifics. Have I not done this? Have I done that? Have I neglected this? Boy, I tell you, we start reading this. We give a copy of this to the kids at the St. Michael's Conference for Youth about Tuesday, Wednesday. We expect all the kids to, can't require it, but to make a confession, and we use positive peer pressure. And for many of the kids, it's the first time they've really thought about how it is they're living in relationship to their God. And so this list, we tell them, don't write on the sheets, write it on your own piece of paper, and then after the confession you burn it, in a wonderful tangible sense of doing away with those sins. But it's a wonderful way for them to begin to realize that that there's ways that they can improve, that God can forgive them for what they're doing. So
You say you have some pamphlets?
I do. I have some pamphlets upstairs. Okay? Remind me after church. You're going to stay for the 10 o'clock service, stay for lunch? Okay. Remind me after that, and I'll bring some down. Okay, next one. Gordon, I'm sorry, I was very verbose on that one. It's because I have experience with sin, that's why. Not just other people's, but my own. So that's why confession's a favorite to me.
Matrimony or marriage, a lifelong union of husband and wife, established by a covenant between them and with God. It is a Christ-commanded effort by a man and a woman to establish a life and a family and a place where God's rule prevails in this world, so that they will recognize heaven when they get there.
I love that expression. That's Father Tarsitano. The idea that we're supposed to, in the chaos and craziness of the world, your family is supposed to be a preparation in this fallen world for heaven. So, and I have news for you. In my family, it'll be chaotic. So, heaven. If my family's 3 boys and a girl, Okay, go ahead, Cory.
Outward and visible, an exchange of vows, I and S.
Inward and spiritual.
Got it. Power to live in holiness and grace. Must all Christians be married? No, some are called to celibacy. All, whether married and unmarried, are called to be chaste. Chastity means pure, to order your sexual relations for holiness and obedience.
Whether you are married or single, you are called to the virtue of chastity. Chastity means that you are ordering your desires and your urges and your actions in the way in which is comparable with Scripture, which is in holy matrimony between one man and one woman. Okay, monks take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And people, when they hear the word chastity, when a monk says it, assumes, oh, well, then it means you can't be married. That is not what it means. Chastity for somebody who's not married means that you're not sexually active. Chastity for somebody who is married means that you are ordering your desires to strengthen your family, to procreate children if it's God's will, and to use that ordering for one another's mutual comfort and the avoidance of sin. Those are all actually in the old marriage ceremony, all the reasons they give for marriage. Okay, so these physical desires are very powerful. They're God created, and if we distort them, they can be very troublesome. But for a monk, because he's single, he's ordered so that he is also called to be celibate, which means he is not sexually active in that sort of way. Or as a monk at Father Bernard Rochelle's order in New York said, he was describing the knots on his cord, which represent the three vows, poverty, chastity, and obedience. He was trying to explain it to these kids in the Bronx, and he said, well, they're poverty, chastity, and obedience, which means no money, no honey, and a boss. So I think that sums it up, at least for a teenager. I like that very much. So, yes, sir. Ian.
Is it true that marriage is a contract between you and God?
God is certainly a part of it. Contract language, I think would rather use the word covenant, which is stronger than the contract. Lawyers would tell you the contract's binding and all that good stuff. And then a good lawyer will tell you no contract is ever really can be broken, right, Gordon? Is that true? Right.
It's a long dissertation.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I know.
One of the reasons why I've heard that divorce is immoral is because basically you're by your words, signing a contract between you and another person and God, and now you're saying, God, I lied.
Well, or I haven't tried, or I haven't depended upon you for help. You certainly can't go into a marriage with your fingers crossed. I do not like let people go into a marriage with a prenuptial agreement, because you're going in with reservations, right? Well, we'll never have to use it, but just in case. That's a reservation, and I'll confess, for any purpose, I will confess, I let one family enter into a marriage with that, and it was because of the amount of grief that one of the parties' families were giving her for marrying a guy who had no money, and her family had considerable amounts of money. And so, and they were an older couple, and they were just receiving so much grief, and it was bearing so much on her heart, that I said, go ahead and do it. Because you really aren't going to ever use this, And so I did make a pastoral decision. But for anybody else who comes to me, they're going to have to prove to me that this isn't their own reservation and somebody who's convinced them that you need an out. Okay, there's no exception. The one, of course, being when I got married, because I had to get my wedding license, and there was in St. Joe's County here in Michigan, they made you look at the rules, the laws of matrimony. Of marriage, and the first half are what they call the laws of consanguinity. Who you can't marry your brother, can't marry your half brother. The consanguinity is Latin for with blood, so people you're related to. And then the second half are people who can't enter into a legal contract.